There are different aspects to the ways that we design apps. There's the structure of our app's data, there's the layout of this data in screens and navigation, the actions that users can perform within the app, and then there's also the types of users that our apps are made for. When we design for different types of users, our app can look and behave very differently depending on who's logged in, and the way to manage and design for different users in Glide is with the user profiles table. In this video, we're going to cover setting up user profiles, how your sign-in settings relate to your user profiles table, and some basic examples of how to build your apps around your users. A few quick caveats before we start. User profiles are distinct from user-specific columns. User profiles are the rows in the users table, and they represent all of the known information about the users in your project, whereas user-specific columns are just cells that hold individual data for each user. These are unrelated to a user's profile, although they seem similar. Roles and the role column are an important point to understand if you're managing permissions for a large number of users, but roles will be covered in depth in a separate video. And it's important to understand how users affect your pricing plan. Anyone that signs into your app and has a profile will count as a user, and depending on your plan, you may have limits for this. When you start a new blank project, Glide will automatically create a users table for you and put you as the only user in that table. As a result, you'll see that you are viewing your project as you. This is the Viewing As dropdown, and when you add more users later, you'll be able to preview your app as those users to help you build out the functionality for different user types. You can change what your users table is called, use an entirely different table, and add your own columns to define your user profile data in a way that makes sense for your project. Whatever columns you add, though, a user profile table must always have 3 columns: name, email, and photo. And optionally, if you're using roles in your project, a role column. Let's add a new column for job title and add a new user. We're doing this manually here, but you can bulk import users so long as the CSV or Excel file has the same structure as your user table. Now we can interact with our project as Kate or Jack. Now, this of course doesn't make a difference on this screen, but if we view the user profile in the project, it will. A user profile page is always found here on desktop or here on mobile. On the right here, you can see that Glide has already mapped the name, email, and photo columns to the right properties, and this shows up on our profile. Above, you can also see that this is where we can change the user profile table to a different one if we need it. But obviously, if we don't have any table, this breaks the user profile functionality across our app. So that's the fundamentals of the users table. It determines the users of your project and their properties. However, this doesn't necessarily control who can sign in to your app. That's slightly different. So let's take a look at that now and how it works in conjunction with your users table. Glide apps can either be public or private. If your app is private, then every user has to sign in and they will end up having a profile. If your app is public, then you can have control over whether your app has sign-in functionality and, as a result, user profiles. Let's have a quick look at the different settings here and explain how they'll work. If your app is private, then users will have to sign in. Choosing the users table will mean that only users in the user table will be able to sign in. That means that you'll need to populate the users table with the users that you want to sign into your app, or use the controls in Glide to invite people to your project. The other 3 options let you choose other sources of emails that are allowed to sign in or sign up to your project. This means that if their email isn't already in the users table, but they are allowed to sign in through these other methods, then when they first sign up, a new profile row will be added to the user profiles table. Now, if your app is public and doesn't require sign-in, then your users won't have any profiles. Required sign-in means that everyone has to sign into your project before they can view it, and anyone can sign into your project. And when they do, they will be creating a profile, and their email will be added to the user profiles table. Optional sign-in means that anyone in the world can view your project, but only some people can sign in or sign up, and you get to decide this with the different choices below. The final thing to consider with privacy settings is the authentication methods. By default, your app's authentication will be set to PIN emails, but you can also allow your users to sign in other ways. If a user doesn't have access, you can allow them to request it here on the sign-in page. And finally, if you want to protect your users' real email addresses, then you can hide their email addresses using virtual ones. When you do this, they can still sign in with their emails, but their email will be replaced with a virtual one in the data editor, ensuring no one, not even you or members of your project, will know what their real email is. So let's look at some basic examples of using user profiles now. When you have user profile information, you can access that data from anywhere. For example, here we have a home screen that says welcome. We can make this more personalized though by adding a title component and connecting the user profile data. Now, when a different user logs in, their home screen will be personalized to them. This also, of course, works with any kind of computation in the data editor. Here we've got a template column that says hello name, and depending on who's signed in, name will be replaced with their name. You can also use user profile values in actions. Here we have a button on each user's public profile within the apps directory, and we've tied the compose email action to send to their email. The important thing to realize here, though, is that because we want this to be a public directory of all users, this collection is displaying the entire table of user profiles, not the current user, which would be this set of values here. If we chose the current user profile email value here, then all of these buttons would just simply email the current user who's logged in. In other words, everyone would just be emailing themselves when they pressed these buttons. So in that sense, there's two different ways to use the user profiles table. One, to show a directory of people like this, but mainly you're going to be using it to use the information for the current user that's logged in. So that's a brief look at user profiles. Have a look for the follow-up video to this in our university to learn more in-depth techniques and things that you can do with user profiles in your projects.